Hello, everybody. So I'm just getting like a little bit set up, making sure that everybody can hear me. My name is Catherine, and I'm the owner and curator of Sew Your Bag. So today we're going to be working on this pattern, which is the Alkebulan Reversible Tote pattern. And I thought I would go live because I was at So Magical Expo, and I know a couple of people didn't finish their bags. I've been getting pictures coming in to me on my private messenger, letting me know that some of you have finished your bags, some of you are in progress. But I thought what I would do is hop on for those of you who have not completed your bag or wanted to see it close up on how to construct it. So the plan for today is that you should have cut out all of your pieces, and I'm going to take it from the point of everything is interfaced according to the pattern. And then what we would do is we would just put it together. So I'm going to just do a quick check to make sure I can hear myself and that I am in fact live. I can hear myself. Perfect. So I am in fact live. If you're joining me and you see me, please say hi. Let me know where you're from. I know after I left Florida, there was a storm or a hurricane that came. I believe it was Nicole, and I'm hoping that everybody has arrived home safely by now, and that except for property, that everybody is safe as far as your physical being, because that's what's important, right? Is that everybody is safe, and everything else can be replaced. So with that being said, I'm going to be doing a little bit of camera flipping, so I'll try to keep it focused on what I'm doing. But if for some reason you can't see what I'm doing, let me know. I will be going between my cutting mat and my sewing machine just so that you can get an up close view of exactly what I'm doing as I'm doing it. It makes it easier, whether you're watching it live or on replay, it makes it easier to see what I'm doing as I say what I'm doing. So I'm just going to go over the pieces, and we're going to go to the cutting mat. So let's just see if we can get a little bit of focus here. There we go. And we'll go over the pieces of the tote. So the first thing that we should have is we should have two straps. So these straps are going to draw the inside of the bag in. And the straps should have been, and they're called ties, they should have been not interfaced. So we're not interfacing them. And the way that we did these is that we folded one edge up, just one, because the other end is going to get sewn into the bag. We fold it up. And then what we did is we folded this in half, just like that. We ironed it. We opened it up again. And then we folded the long edges to the middle fold. So we folded one side in, ironed it, fold the other side in, iron it. And then once we have both of them folded in, we folded it completely in half, matching the folded edges. So we just match the folded edges. And then you can clip them together, or you can just, if you're okay with sewing them without clipping them, you would then just, leave it like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clip these together, and I'm going to put them to the side. The next thing we should have done, or you should have, is your actual straps. And these are the straps for the top of the tote. These were constructed exactly the same way as the ties. However, we were not folding over any of those edges. Those edges remain raw edges, and they will get tucked into the top of the bag when we complete it. So along with folding it to the middle, you should have a piece of stabilizer that runs down the middle. And this is to give some firmness to your strap. You can use foam. So the one thing nice about live is that I can give you a little bit extra tips. You can use a piece of foam in the middle if you want it a little bit more stable. I would recommend something like Annie Soft and Stable, only because it compresses very nicely in a domestic sewing machine, and it's very easy to sew through. So we should have had two of those. You should have two of those. So two straps. Next, you're going to have your exterior pieces. So I'm going to show you my exterior and my lining. Both of these, one of them should have been interfaced. And if you were in the, if you got the if you were in the SME, the So Magical Expo, I used waterproof canvas for the lining to make it less interfacing. The pattern actually calls for cotton lining along with interfacing. So I just want to make that clear. You can use waterproof canvas, which is what I'm going to use today. If you use the waterproof canvas, there is no interfacing required. I'm going to use this beautiful Ankara fabric. Because it is a cotton fabric, I did interface it with a woven interface, and I used DLH 2010, which is my own interface, and I'll include that in the link below. So you should have 2 exterior pieces along with 2 lining pieces. Okay. Your lining pieces should be shorter than your exterior pieces. So the reason that it's shorter is because in your lining, we will be adding a border, right? So this is our lining piece, and this is going to be the top border. So what happens is when you look in the bag, the top piece will be the same as the exterior piece. Okay, so we should have 2 top pieces that are going to correspond to our 2 lining pieces. Yes, the lining pieces are shorter. So I'm just going to clip those together. I clip things together to make it easier for me later on when I'm looking for pieces. I don't have to hunt for them. And then the last piece you're going to need is you will need your pocket. So your pocket initially will be on the inside of your bag. However, if you reverse it, the pocket will be on the outside. So for the pocket as well, I used waterproof canvas, and I used the Ankara. So the Ankara will be facing out, and this will be the back side. This will be the underside of your pocket. So what I would recommend that you not do is that you use your lining fabric for underneath, because nobody really sees it when you reverse it. And don't use your good fabric with someplace where people will not see it. This will get stitched to the ends of our bag, so it will get stitched in later on. But you want to make sure that you interface this piece as well. So that should be all of our pieces prepped with interfacing. And the last thing we're going to need is we're going to need foam. The foam that I use is Annie Soft and Stable foam. So this is the foam. Like I said, it compresses very nicely in the sewing machine, and it's also very easy to sew with. The foam I cut larger in the pattern than the finished piece, and I'll explain this again later as well. And that's because I based all around it, and then I cut the foam to the measurement. That way I know I have exactly the right amount of foam. Okay, so let's get started. So now that we've prepared our handles and our straps, so that was these 4 pieces, right? 2 ties and 2 handles. We're going to go to the sewing machine. I stitch everything in here using a 1/4 of an inch, except when I top stitch, I use 1/8 of an inch. Top stitching is going to be between a 4 and a 4.5 on your sewing machine. You can use a 5, whatever makes you comfortable. As you learn to use your sewing machine, you'll know exactly what stitch length you like best. Okay, so I'm going to stitch both of these exactly the same way. I start with the fold. So when I'm stitching, there is a fold right here, right? It's folded. I start with the fold because if for whatever reason something is off, I can always readjust it on that piece right there. If you start here, which is where it's actually folded, you then have to manipulate a lot more to get these 2 pieces to line up. So I always start on where these long edges are folded, and I start on those sides first, and then I sew on the other side. And I do that for both. So I'm going to close this up using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. When I get to the bottom over here, I'm going to leave my needle in the down position. I'm going to lift my presser foot and I'm going to pivot this 90 degrees. So I'm going to turn it this way. Then I'm going to stitch at 1/8 of an inch across the bottom. Leave my needle in the down position again when I get to about 1/8 of an inch from the corner. Lift my presser foot and I'm going to pivot once again this way. Lower your presser foot and stitch that edge close and then come back along the bottom. So I'm going to do the same thing for all 4 of these pieces. If you want, after you've sewn that 1/8 of an inch, you can also come back in and sew 1/4 of an inch, but we're going to sew 1/8 of an inch. So let's go to the sewing machine. Okay. So it doesn't really matter where you start. I don't really have a preference as to where you start in this case. If you want, you can start along that short edge that's right here, because this is going to get sewn into the bag and you won't see it. I do back stitch at the start and the stop. And for me, my 1/8 of an inch, and this is something you should measure, from my needle to the inside right here, inside of my presser foot, is going to be 1/8 of an inch. So I just keep an eye on that inside. The outside of my presser foot is 1/4 of an inch. So you should measure from your needle to the outside to see what it is. I use a lot for the patterns. For the most part, I use 1/4 of an inch because it's really just using the outside of your presser foot. If your presser foot is maybe like 3/8 of an inch, I believe that's on a Janome, you can use the outside 3/8 of an inch as well. Just be consistent in the pattern. So I'm turning my stitch length up to 4 because it's a top stitch, so between a 4 and a 4.5, and I'm going to stitch across. When I get to about 1/8 of an inch from that end, I'm going to leave the needle in the down position, lift my presser foot up, rotate 90 degrees, and I'm going to come back down this edge here to close that up. When I get to this end at the bottom, about 1/8 of an inch away, I'm going to leave the needle down once again, lift the presser foot, rotate it 90 degrees, stitch back over to the opposite side till I'm about 1/8 of an inch away. Now, if you aren't quite 1/8 of an inch, you can change your stitch length to a smaller stitch length. So you can rotate your stitch length so maybe it's at a 2 or 3. You can take one stitch. So I'm just going to take a single stitch. And then once you've taken that stitch, you can turn it back up to your regular 4. Okay, so I'm going to go back into the hole that I just came out of. So that's one way you can take that like half a stitch. Once again, needle in the down position, lift your presser foot, rotate 90 degrees, and come back up the edge that's folded. Something I want to mention as well is when you're sewing, don't look at the needle go up and down here. You're going to look a little bit before it. So I tend to look right here where my presser foot starts, and then you will catch it. If you look here, your eyes will start, you'll lose focus very quickly and it won't work. I'm going to back tack and I'm going to cut my thread. So now you've finished one of those straps or those ties, and we're going to do the same thing for the other 2. Or other 3 actually. So we're going to do it for the other tie, and then we're going to do it for our handles. Make sure you leave that needle in the down position before you pivot, because you're trying to get the stitches to just continue. Something else I will mention to you is if anybody notices in the corners, and I'll call it jogging, but if you notice in the corner when you lift your presser foot and turn it, you get a line that goes angular like this. What you should do is when your needle's in the down position, crank your wheel. So you're going to crank it until that needle starts going up. Sometimes when it goes down, it doesn't catch the bobbin thread. So what happens is when you rotate, you'll get the jogging because it didn't catch the bobbin thread. If you rotate your wheel on your machine till the needle goes up ever so slightly, you then know that it caught the bobbin thread, and therefore when you pivot, you should minimize the amount of that jogging that happens. So I'm going to lift, I'm going to rotate it again 90 degrees, go to the other corner. I need like a little bit of a half a stitch here. Rotate again and come back down. And you should take your time. I know that I'm moving fast, but take your time with this, just so that you get it. I'll try to show you what I mean. So if you look, let's see if I can get it for you. Right here in the corner, that's where I mean, make sure that that needle is going back up. And if you make sure it goes back up, you know for a fact that it caught the bobbin thread underneath, which is, that'll minimize it. If you have any questions, please type them in. I can see all the comments. So please type them into the comments. Let me know where you're from, you're tuning in from. Okay. So now this is my strap. I'm going to do the same thing. Once again, I'm going to close up this side. I'm going to stitch across the bottom. And the easiest way to sew this is, and I know this is going fast, I hold my hands ever so lightly on the edges. I don't push or pull. I let the machine, the feed dogs, do the work. And by holding my hand in the same place, I can shift either right or left to get it back into alignment. I use these fingers or these fingers sometimes as little bumpers, so that what happens is the strap is just following these two fingers, and that helps to keep it straight as well. So that's one strap. If you want, you can go back in and you can do another row of stitches. I'm just doing the one. And this is the second strap. So I don't know if you can notice right here, you can see how it's not aligned. So I'm just going to push this. This is what I meant by starting at the end that's closed, because you can adjust it. If I had started at this end that was folded, I would not be able to adjust this later because I would have already sewn that. So now we have both straps sewn and both ties sewn. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set these aside. And I'm just going to trim some of these threads here. But we're going to set these aside for later. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to prepare our exterior front and back pieces. And so I'm going to grab those, and you can mark the top with a T and the bottom with a B if you would like. I'm going to so you can mark this top or an arrow. I marked an arrow. I'm trying to get a marking tool so you guys can see what I mark. Okay. So that's my top up here. And I would do that on both pieces. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to measure down and put a mark that's 1 inch from the top. And that's because we're going to fold this. So I'm going to draw a line 1 inch from the top. And if you don't, get in the habit of using a tool that's erasable or, you know, in some way. Don't use a permanent marker. I know some people do. Some people use a pencil. Okay, so I drew a line. So I'm going to take this raw edge that's here, and I'm going to fold it down to that line just like that. And when I do that, I'm going to iron it or press it with my iron. And when I'm done, that fold should be a 1/2 inch. So the reason that I drew this line, which was twice the fold, is because then I know I can fold it down. If you drew a line that was a 1/2 inch and then you tried to fold it, you can't see the line. So that's why I do it. So in the interest of time, I'm going to use a piece of double-sided tape. I like using 1/8 of an inch unless I have to use 1/4 of an inch. I use 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape. And I recommend it if it comes in a plastic, like this one comes in this plastic. And I have this at my shop as well. Put it back in the plastic, because if you don't, you get little pieces of thread. So I'm just going to put a piece of double-sided tape along this edge, because I am going to sew this at a certain, at 1/4 of an inch. It won't matter. So I'm not going to start quite to the edge because I need to sew this up. So I'm going to start about a half an inch away from the edge. And I'm going to put a piece of double-sided tape. You should fold it. You should fold it and iron it. I'm just using this about a 1/2 inch from the end. And I'm just going to leave that there. I'm not going to worry about it right now, but I'm going to leave that there. When you fold it for later on, because you're going to fold it like this and iron it, later on we're going to put the foam right here at that 1/2 inch mark. And when you put it at the 1/2 inch mark and fold this over, it will help to reduce the bulk. You don't want the foam to go all the way up to the top, because when you fold it this way, it's 2 layers. And that doesn't make a lot of people's domestic sewing machine very happy. So we fold this over the foam like that, and then the foam goes right here where the fold line is. Okay. So I'm going to do the same thing for the other one. So I've already marked the top. I'm going to draw that 1 inch line. like this. And for those of you who may not have double-sided tape, I will iron this one for you, just to show you. I cover this. This is a inexpensive ironing board I got from like Dollar General, and I just covered it with like 3 Teflon sheets. So that's really what this is. And that's because I do a lot of my interfacing. I do have a heat press, but I do for the videos, it's very hard to drag people around with me to the heat press. So this is my line down here. I'm going to fold this over till it meets that line, and then I'm going to iron it. And I'm going to do that. And I started in the middle only because it makes it easier to go left and right. And watch your fingers, irons are hot. And you can see I ironed that all the way to the end. And then this was a, the pen I used was a Frisian pen, so the line goes away with heat. And then I'm going to fold this one down on this side and do the same thing. So I'm just going to fold to the line and iron. Be careful with Frisian pens because sometimes not only does it go away with the heat, but it comes back with the cold. So if you use it on the outside. The other thing is if you're using a Frisian pen, sometimes if you draw a line, especially in like something like this, which is black, it goes away. But what it also does is it strips the color. So then you'll see a white line where you drew it. Okay, so that was 2 ways of doing that fold, right? I did one where I ironed it, and this is where it's going to be. And I did the other one here where I'm going to use a double-sided tape and just fold it over. Okay, so that's going to be your front and your back, preparing it. The other thing we're going to need to do is on the bottom of our front and back, we're going to draw a line, and the line we're going to draw is going to be a 1/2 inch, and that's because we're going to stitch this at a 1/2 inch. So the line is meant to give you a guide as to where to sew. If you know where that is on your sewing machine, you do not need to write, you do not need to draw this line. I'm going to draw it. And that's going to be our stitch line. This pattern is definitely a beginner-friendly pattern. So I give you all of the steps to make sure that your project is successful. So I'm going to draw another one here at a 1/2 inch. Okay. And that's going to be our stitch line. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to take one of our pieces, front or back, whichever one it is, they're identical inside. We're going to put one right side up. We're then going to take another one of our pieces and we're going to put it right side down. So what you'll have is right sides to right side. You will align the bottom of your pieces. So I'm just going to align the corners here. Grab some clips or pins. If you receive the kit, you have clips. I draw the line on both bottom pieces because when I get to the sewing machine, I never know which side I'm going to sew from. So if they're on the bottom of both sides, I know that I always have that line. So I line up the corners first because that's really where I want to make sure it matches. And then I will, if I have to ease, I will do the rest of the pieces. So I normally do the middle and the sides, and then I ease in on the other pieces. Something I want to mention is that your clips, if you look at them, they're sort of round on the top and flat on the bottom. That's purposeful, right? It's purposeful that it's done that way because the flat piece is what should rest on your sewing machine as you sew. If it's upside down, you will have that curved edge and you will not get a smooth motion when it goes through. So make sure that whatever way you're going to sew, that the flat side is the bottom. If you notice, I put the curves on the top. So when I sew, I'm going to do this and my flat side will be against the bed of my sewing machine and it will glide that much smoother. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to stitch on that 1/2 inch line that I drew at the bottom. or a 1/2 inch seam on your sewing machine. I use a stitch length of 3. Anybody who's a quilter, I think this was a little bit different, but I use a stitch length of 3 for regular stitching. A top stitching, like I mentioned, was between a 4 and a 4.5. So I'm just going to stitch on that line, back tack at the beginning and the end. And I'm not pulling, I'm just straightening out. Okay, so I stitched on that at a 1/2 inch. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to lay it flat on our cutting surface. And we're going to open up this seam, just like that. I'm going to iron it because I want it to be as crisp as possible. But I am going to iron this. So I'm going to get my iron back out, my ironing board. And I'm going to iron that. You can finger press it or roller press it. Like I said, I want it to be as flat as possible while I'm working with it. So I'm going to open that up. I will iron the front and the back piece here, and I will turn it over and iron the front as well. In case anybody wants to know, I do use an Oliso. I love this iron. This is my second one. The other iron that I like a lot is the Rowenta. I especially like their ironing boards because they're nice and wide and big. Okay. So now I've done that. So now that's nice and flat. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my foam and I'm going to attach my foam to this piece. Remember I said to you the foam is bigger than my actual fabric. So I'm going to grab the foam and I'm going to lay my piece right on top of it. Now, what you want to make sure when you lay this on top of it, and it is bigger, I promise you it's hard to see it, but I'll turn it this way so you can see it. See, it's bigger. What you want to do is the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to align the top of my foam with where my fold line is that I ironed down, right? Or double-sided tape. So at the 1/2 inch mark, and I'll do it on the side that I ironed to make it easier. On the 1/2 inch mark, I'm going to lay this over this way. So I'll turn it over. And hopefully you guys can see that. And I'm not putting the foam all the way to the end. I'm putting it to where that fold line is, right here. And once I've done that, I'm going to clip the side, and you should be able to put a clip in the sides to hold it. So just make sure you get it right in there. So then this piece of fabric, when we're done, is going to fold over that foam. And like I said, you shouldn't have any bulk in there, and it should be pretty well for you to sew. Like I said, this is Annie Soft and Stable, no affiliate. I use, okay, because I keep mentioning it, so I don't want anybody to think that I'm affiliated with them. I use this, I use sew-in. I don't like the iron-on because I find that the iron-on, if it doesn't adhere properly, it separates from the fabric, and then you see kind of air pockets, whereas that doesn't happen. And for Annie Soft and Stable as well, it gives the bag a lot of body so it can sit up on its own. Okay, so I've done that. I'm going to clip this side, and you can trim a little bit. Don't trim too much. But for example, over here, I have a lot of foam. I'm going to trim that, but I'm going to leave a good bit still because I want to make sure that I have enough when I'm basting and I don't cut it too short. So I cut it to about like 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to put a clip. So you're going to do that all the way down the side. Make sure it's totally flat. I'll just put in a couple of snips, cutting this just a little bit. I make sure that I'm attaching it here at the center seam, because that's like the midway point. Then I'm going to flip it upside down this way. And then over here, you should have another fold, right? So if I look at this and I would have folded down, I'm going to add clips because I put double-sided tape on this side. So I'll just add clips to keep the fold line. So you'll have 2 fold lines. One at one end and one at the other. And the reason that I'm doing this at the opposite end, because you can see the foam is longer, but so that you don't have to guess how short to cut the foam at the opposite end, right? If it's laying totally smooth, you're just going to cut the foam on that line because that fold line is where it should tuck in. So I'm going to rotate this just like that, and I'm going to cut on that fold line. And I know it looks kind of wonky, but believe me, my piece is straight. It's the way the foam, I laid it on the foam. So it's folded here. I'm going to take a ruler. Lay my ruler on that fold, and I'm just going to draw a line because it'll make it easier for me. All right, so I just laid the ruler there, and I'm just going to draw a line because I want to make sure don't cut into your fabric at the top. So if you're doing this with a rotary cutter, please be careful not to cut into your fabric at the top. So I just drew a line, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut on that line to get rid of that extra foam. Okay, and then what happens is if I flip this over, that other side should tuck in very nicely to that fold at the 1/2 inch. So if I turn it over, you can see it's right there. And I'm just going to clip the sides again. I'm clipping them with the flat side up because when I take this to the sewing machine to baste it down, I'm going to, I like to see my fabric. So I like to see where I'm stitching. So my clips are with the flat side up. And when I turn it over, the curved side is over there. See that? So I'm just going to cut this a little bit here. I don't want to have any buckling at the end. I want a totally smooth piece of fabric. Okay. So that's it. And put as many clips as you need to hold your fabric in place. So if you need 100 clips, put them in there. I also don't use pins because if you use a pin, it pulls the fabric up like this, even ever so slightly. And I want it to be as flat as possible. So that's why I don't use pins. I'm also not a garment sewer, so I didn't start out using pins. I started out using clips. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to baste stitch down both sides. So we're going to base stitch down both of these sides. Base stitching is done at 1/8 of an inch, so it's 1/8 of an inch in this way. And when you base stitch it down, excuse me, I use the longest stitch length on my sewing machine. I base stitch a lot on my patterns because I think it's easier to base stitch than to stitch it. And if something goes wrong, it's easier to rip. So I'm just going to sew the sides down. Make sure that you unfold this. So this should be totally flat. Don't base stitch it folded. And you're going to start here, base stitch all the way down to the bottom. And then you're going to do the same over here. So the longest stitch on my sewing machine is a 6. So I'm going to turn mine up to a 6, 1/8 of an inch down both sides. And we're going to sew it. Once again, my 1/8 of an inch for me is on the inside of my presser foot. So that's my 1/8 of an inch. And I'm just going to sew this. I'm also going to roll my material because I have a camera right here. So back tack at the beginning and the end. Once again, make sure this opposite end is unfolded. Do not iron, I'm sorry, sew it with the top folded. It has to be unfolded. So I've done one side, and I'm going to do the other side now. Okay, so I've base stitched down both sides. The other thing that I'm going to do, and for anybody who's following along, I am on page 8 of the pattern. So before I cut this, this is my center seam. I'm going to stitch 1/8 to the left of that center seam and 1/8 to the right. And that's to lock down the foam to the main body. So that's why I do it. So 1/8 of an inch, if you're not comfortable with 1/8 of an inch, then stitch down at 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so whatever you're comfortable with. So I'm going to do 1/8 of an inch this way to the center seam and 1/8 of an inch this way. I am going to use a top stitching stitch length, so I'm going to turn my machine stitch length to a 4. And I'm going to top stitch it. You can, I rolled my my piece, I rolled it so that it would fit in the throat of my sewing machine. So turn your stitch length to between a 4 and a 4.5 for top stitching. And I'm going to stitch, in this case, to the left of that center line at 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to flip it around now and sew the other side on the other side. So I've sewn on one side, I've sewn on one side this way, and then I flipped it around. I'm going to sew on the other side, 1/8 of an inch. Once again, if you're not comfortable with an eighth, use a quarter. We just want to lock it down to the main body. Okay. And now it's locked down to the main body. So now we can go back in and we can trim the rest of this foam off. So I'm just going to cut that foam right off to the edge of the fabric, and it's already basted in. You can use a rotary cutter if you'd like. Just be very careful. You don't want to mess up your bag. I normally use a ruler and a rotary cutter to do this. But once again, you can use a pair of scissors. For those of you who are watching, if you have a question, if you're watching it live, I should say, if you have a question, please post it. And I'm going to turn this around and I'm going to cut to the other side. So all I'm doing is trimming off the extra foam. So now you can see why I made the foam bigger. I normally make the foam about anywhere from an inch. If you're comfortable, you can do a half an inch, but I like to have about a half an inch on either side. Some people think it's wasteful, but I think my time is more valuable, and there's nothing worse than having to cut another piece of foam because it wasn't big enough. Okay. So now I trim that down. Okay, if you have a label or a tag that you want to add to your bag, now is the time to add it. I'm not going to add one to my bag. Oh, I think I have one. I'm just going to add this tag to my bag. I didn't know I had one right handy. And you can really add it anywhere, you know, down your bag. I give an approximate measurement, but, you know, you can add it anywhere you want. Just want to see which one I like, which side I like better. I think I like this side better. Okay. So I'm going to add my label here. And like I said, it gives you an approximate measurement in the directions. I'm just going to fold this in half. You don't have to do this. It is in the directions if you have a tag. You don't have to do this if you do not have a tag. But since I had one handy, I'm just going to fold it here. And I'm going to, I just want to make sure on my piece that I'm like at the center. There's nothing worse than you do this and you're not at the center. Okay, so I'm going to just take this. I'm going to grab my pen. Like I said, I'm just guessing. It's a bag. I'm not going to be precise, and I'm just going to make a mark here. And this has a plate. No, this tag just says handcrafted. That's all it says. And I'm then going to take my seam ripper. And with my seam ripper, all I do is I go up either at the bottom or the top. I go the bottom. I put it in the bottom. I pivot it and put it through the top. Okay, so I don't know if you see that. I put it in the bottom here and out through the top. And then when I cut, I know that I'm not cutting too much. You can do this with a pointy pair of scissors as well. You can do this with a pointy pair of scissors as well. Okay, and then you should add in here a little bit of like fray check, or you can add a dab of glue. I actually have fray check only because it's cotton. So, but you can also add a little dab of like Elmer's glue. You just want something to stop it from fraying. I'm going to make sure my tag is right side up. And I'm just going to stick it through those holes. Make sure that you got it through the foam as well. I'm going to take my little plate here. I fold in, push it down, and fold in towards the center. I don't fold out because I find that if you pull this, if it's folded out this way, it will easily glide up. So I fold in. I try to leave any kind of plastic. This has plastic over it until I'm done with my bag, to the very end. And then on the back of this, let's see if I have it, stick a piece of like duct tape, or I may have a little bit of washi tape. But you want to stick a piece of tape. And I'm going to stick paper tape on the back. I'm going to stick a piece of paper tape. You just want to stick something on there to hold it down so it doesn't come out. I actually use Gorilla Tape from Home Depot. It's a great tape. So I'm just going to stick a couple of pieces of this paper tape on there. One second. Give me 1 second. I don't know if you hear my phone ringing. Okay. So that's that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab our straps. And 1 second. I just want to make sure you guys can hear me. So we're going to grab our straps. Oh. Great. All right. Great. Okay. So these are the straps. We're going to grab those. And then I marked my center, and the way that I did that was I folded it in half this way, and I marked the center. In the directions, it gives you what the center mark is on your bag. And so it's half of the top and the bottom. So I'm just going to mark this also the same way. And when I put a snip in here or a pin, some people put pins, I make sure if you're going to cut into your fabric, keep it within the seam allowance. So it's only a little tiny, like 1/8 of an inch nick at an angle. I'm holding my scissor at an angle, and I do a little snip just like that. So then when I open it up, I don't know if you, hopefully you can see it. It's got a little snip, and it's within the seam allowance. So when I sew, I don't have to worry about seeing it. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our straps, and I'm just going to make sure, because I cut mine kind of, I cheated a little bit when I cut mine. So I just want to make sure they're both the same length. So I'm just going to cut them the same length. Okay. And then once they're the same length, you're going to lay it on your cutting mat, and you're going to measure it to the left and the right of center, right? And when you do this, it's up to you. Everybody's different. There's a seam right here, and then this is the folded edge. Just make sure you're consistent when you're laying down your strap. So if your seam, or that opening right here where you stitch it together, is on the outside, make sure you do the same thing on the other strap. Okay? So then we're going to take this strap, and the inside, the measurement that I give you is from here to the inside of your strap, and you're going to clip it in place. I like to add 2 clips. You can add 1 clip, but I like to add 2 because I need to know that it's totally straight. Okay? Then take your strap, pull it out so that it's straight, and bend it in this way, and then lay it down. So what I did was I pulled it straight. I grabbed the inside of the strap this way, and then I rotated my hand up. So then I know now that my strap is straight. And I'm going to clip that in place as well. Double check it, make sure that it's straight. All right, so just double check and make sure this is straight. I'm then going to fold it in half this way. I did put a snip here, right? And I want to do the same thing. So I'm going to line that up. I'm going to grab my other strap. Once again, make sure if you have the fold on the outside, put it on the outside. If you have it on the inside, put it on the inside. And you're going to clip it in place right here. Do the same thing. Pull your strap straight. I grabbed it on the inside like this, and I flip it around like that. And I'm just going to lay this down and make sure. Once again, this is a tote. You can make this strap longer if you want. I know somebody who did when we were doing it in the group before, but you can make it longer or shorter. Now, I'm folding this in half. What I really want to check is that my straps here are aligned where they should be. So they should be meeting at the same point, and they are, because if I clip the side, I can see that they're at the same point. Double check that, because it's very easy for it not to be at the same point. All right. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch, back stitch at the beginning of the end, but we're going to base stitch using the longest stitch length on your sewing machine. We're going to base this in. So we're going to base this strap in at 1/8 of an inch. So we're going to do that in 4 places, here, here, and then the front and the back. Okay, so let's go to the sewing machine and do that. Let me just, I'm just going to do a minor adjustment here because the sun is going down. And because it's going down, the sewing machine's kind of bright. So let me just do a little bit of an adjustment of the coloring here. Okay, hopefully you can see that. All right, so let's stitch it. Turn it up to the longest stitch length on your sewing machine, or I have it at a 6, just something longer. So if you have to rip it out, you can do so easily. All right. I'm going to remove the clips. Make sure you hold on to it. 1/8 of an inch. We're going to stitch, back stitch at the beginning, at the end. And this should be easy because you're sewing over that other stitch line that you did when you sewed the straps. You're sewing back over those lines, that 1/8 of an inch line. So. One strap. Let's do the other. And make sure to keep it straight as you can. It's very easy to sew it in there crooked. Okay. So we've done that. Double check that your straps are even. Double and triple check that you're folded in half, and double check that they're even, they're in the same place. Like I said, there's nothing worse than you put it all together and then it's not where it's supposed to be. Okay, I'm on, for those of you following along, I'm on page 10 of the pattern. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this to the wrong side in half. So I'm folding it in half to the wrong side. I'm going to clip my top and my bottom along the edge. So along this edge, I'm going to clip the top just like that. Lay it flat, and I'm going to clip the bottom. But actually on the side. I don't know where the orange thread is coming from, but. And that's because I'm going to need to cut out those corners. Reach inside and grab your straps, pull them out of the way, because the last thing you want to do is cut into one of those straps. And we're going to do the same thing with the other side, right? We're going to fold it. I'm clipping at the top, making sure the tops match. And then I'm going to make sure that the sides match as well. Okay. So that's what I did. I'm then going to grab my ruler. And I'm going to draw a box here and here on the bottom at the fold, right? So I'm going to draw a box, and my box is going to be for my corner. So I'm just making sure I smooth everything out. And I'm going to draw a box on both corners. Okay, so I drew one box here, and I'm going to draw another box here. You're going to draw it to the edge. I had somebody ask me this. You're drawing it to the edge. You're not drawing it to the seam line. So you're drawing it to the edge of your foam. So now I have two boxes. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out those two boxes. So I'm just adding a clip here to hold it as firm as possible while I cut that out. You can use a rotary cutter. I'm going to use a pair of scissors to make sure I don't cut too much out, but I have used rotary cutter. So I'm going to cut those squares right out. So that's the start of one, and the other. Okay. So that's the corner, and I'm going to do the same on this corner as well. Okay, so now I've cut both of those corners out. I'm going to unclip it right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew the corner. So the reason that I sew this corner, this is a corner, is because I don't want to lose any of the foam on the inside. So I'm just going to base stitch around this opening on both sides of my bag to make sure that when I fold it, I don't lose any of the foam in there. All right. So 1/8 of an inch all the way around both of these openings on the longest stitch length that you have on your sewing machine. So the next thing we're going to do is we're now going to match our corners here. Put clips, match the top. Make sure the top is unfolded. Put a clip, and then just clip on the side. So we're going to sew down both sides of this. We're going to do the same for the opposite side. So we're going to match that corner. Put a clip. Pull your handles out to make sure that you're not going to sew over them. And match the top. And then match the sides. So add as many clips as you need to make this, to get this in. All right. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to sew this side and we're going to sew this side. So we're sewing the front of the bag closed. Make sure that it's right sides together. So we're sewing from the foam should be facing outside. And then we're going to sew down both sides. And we're going to use a half an inch seam allowance. All right. So let's do that. I'm going to just start at the bottom. You can start at the top if you want. I'm going to sew this at a half an inch seam allowance. Back tack at the start and the stop. And yes, my clips are upside down. I didn't think that through. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to open this up. And you should be able to see your seam, which is right here. If you open up your side seam, you should be able to match both of those seams at the bottom and put a clip. Now this will be a little bit tricky. You're going to open up your bag like this and lay it flat and pull as hard as you can, because what you want to do is create a straight line. You want to also make sure that you stick your finger in there like I did and tuck your fabric back. That's why I had you stitch that opening, because it makes it easier to tuck it. You may not get it perfectly over here straight line, but get it as close as you can. And you'll see the benefit, like I said, of basting that onto there. So now I'm going to add clips. And then I'm going to fold it over to the opposite side and do the same thing. So once again, you're going to open up your side seam here. You're going to match this seam with the bottom seam of your bag so that they match. I clip it in place. I always clip centers and then go out to the ends, just like that. Pull that fabric. And then what you're going to do is clip both sides. Once again, I'm on page 10 of the pattern, if anybody's following along. So when you're done, you should have both of your corners clipped. We're then going to sew across this seam. Make sure you keep this open. We're then going to sew across this using a 1/4 inch seam allowance on both corners. I'm going to change my stitch length back to a 3. I'm going to make sure that I back tack at the beginning and the end. And for me, the 1/4 of an inch is going to be right here on the edge of my presser foot right here. If you have to lift your presser foot like I just did, make sure that your needle's in the down position. Okay. So now I've done that. And the last thing I need to do is to attach my ties to the front. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to turn my bag right side out. You can leave it inside out if it's easier. I normally poke from a corner, grab it with my fist, just grab that corner and pull it out and pull it out this way. And you should see when you do this, you should see how nicely your bag stands up with that anti-soft and stable foam. It stands up on its own. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is add these ties. One end of your tie was folded. So this end was my tie was folded. So I'm going to put the side that wasn't folded into the bag. And we're going to base stitch it. So we're going to base stitch it like we did the straps. So if I turn it to the side like this, I'm going to open this seam right here inside the bag. And then I'm just going to, you can eyeball this, just clip it right there so it's centered. And I'm also going to put 2 clips here only because I want to make sure I keep it straight. All right. And then once again, just check to see which this, where I sewed it closed here is facing towards the back of my bag. So I want to make sure on this side I do the same thing. Nobody's going to notice, really, but it's just I think my little OCD thing going on here. And then you're going to open this up again, the top. You're going to take your tie, your side tie. Once again, make sure that the part that's folded, which is the finished edge, is out of the bag, and the raw edge is what you're attaching to the bag. And I'm just making sure that seam is facing the back. I'm just eyeballing it, putting it right here in the center. And you're going to base stitch these in place once again. So you're going to do that for this tie and the other tie. I turned my stitch length up to a 6, or the longest stitch length, and I'm just going to base stitch it in. And I just back tacked a couple of times. And I'm going to do the other one now. And guess what? The exterior of your bag is done. Just like that. Okay, so that's the exterior and it's complete. So now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set this aside for right now. And we're going to start working on our lining pieces. But we're going to prepare it first. So we're going to need the lining top and the lining bottom. So remember I said to you that the lining is cut shorter than the exterior because we have this lining top piece. So we're going to need the lining top and the lining bottom. I'm going to take one lining top, one lining bottom, and set it aside. And then I'm going to grab the other one. So with the lining bottom, right side facing up, and you know on waterproof canvas because it has a texture. If it's smooth, you can see this one's dark. Black is a little bit harder to see, but usually the brighter color, I mean the brighter colors on the back, but you can feel the texture here. You can hear that. And so what you're going to do is take this piece. If you want it, and I normally lay it like this, so that one's on top of the other, like it's both of them are right side up, because I want to make sure if it's directional fabric, it's pointing in the right direction, right? You don't want to stitch it in upside down. This is Ankara, so it doesn't matter. There is no right or wrong direction. And if it's directional, your print should be facing up, right? So you should be able to see it. That way you can turn it around. Once you have it in the right direction, you're then going to take the top, flip it over to the wrong side on top of your bottom. So you're going to do this. And then you're going to clip it in place. Okay, so that's one. I'm just going to set that to the side. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other one. So when I go to the sewing machine, I'm going to sew them both at the same time. Okay, so I just look at it and determine which way I want it. Place them right sides together. Okay, and I will have now both of my lining pieces clipped together. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch across the top of this. So I'm going to stitch them together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance and a 1/4 inch seam allowance and a stitch length of 3. And then once I'm done, I'm going to flip this up once it's stitched, and I'm going to sew on this fabric, the exterior fabric, at 1/8 inch. So I'm going to top stitch it. Naturally, when I push this up, this seam is going to point towards the top. So I'll do it and then I'll show you the first one and then we'll go back and we'll top stitch. But I just wanted to mention that to you. So let's go to the sewing machine and sew this at 1/4 inch, both of them. Once again, the 1/4 inch on my presser foot is the outside of my presser foot here. I'm changing my stitch length to 3. Back tack at the beginning and the end. I do not cut my thread here. I think this is a quilter's thing. I'm not a quilter, but it's a good tip. I just take my other piece without cutting the thread. I tuck it under my presser foot here. When I get onto this fabric, I back tack, and then I keep going. Now I cut my thread. Okay, so I'm going to cut these apart because I kept going. And this is what I was referring to with the top stitching. So we're going to top stitch, but with this laying flat, I'm just going to push this up and I'm going to finger press, or you can use a poly roller or whatever. But when I do that, you'll notice that the seam allowance goes to the top. You don't want the seam allowance to go down. It should naturally go to the top, and that's what we want to do. So we want to push this up. You can iron it. Be careful because this is waterproof canvas. It will get soft, but it will, it'll get hard again once it cools down. So with both of these, I'm just going to push them up like that. And I'm going to top stitch at 1/8 of an inch on the actual fabric itself. So let's go to the sewing machine and do that. Once again, my 1/8 of an inch for me is the inside of my presser foot. So whether it be the right or the left, it's right in here or on that side. That's what I use as my guide. Because this is a top stitch, I'm going to ask that you turn your stitch length to a 4, between a 4 and a 5. Make sure you gave it a good push so it's actually very wasn't on my fabric there for a second. Okay. One second. I did something to my thread. One second. Let me just straighten out my bobbin. All right. Let's top stitch this. And yes, you should back tack at the beginning of the end. I'm not going to cut my thread. I'm just going to keep going with this one. And I just want to make sure it's under my presser foot. Okay, so I've gotten both of those top stitched. Exactly the way that I wanted them. I'm going to cut these threads. And now they're nice and flat. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this has the same folded edge as my front, so that when I put them together, they actually match up. So I'm going to turn these over, and on the back, I'm going to draw that 1-inch line that I drew earlier. So I'm going to grab my ruler, and this just makes it easier, like I said, when you finish, if they're all folded down, to match them up. So I'm going to draw this line. One inch. I'm going to grab my other one, do the same thing, draw that line at 1 inch. I'm going to then grab my ironing board. And I'm going to iron that fold, right? So remember we said we iron it, and we take this top and we fold it down to that line, that 1 inch line that we drew. And that should give us a 1/2 inch fold. I am using a Frisian marker. What I will also say to you is, because this is waterproof canvas, please be careful not to rest your iron on this piece here, because you don't want it to melt onto your iron. So I'm coming from the top and I'm ironing it. And my line will go away because the Frisian goes away with heat. So that's okay. That is an awkward position, so I'm just going to flip it back over. Right, so that's one. And then I'll do the same with the other one. This one. Okay. So we'll set both of those to the side, and now we're going to work on our slip pocket. So for the slip pocket, we're going to need an exterior piece, which is going to be this piece, and we're going to need a lining piece. And this is very easy. We're just going to sew down the long edges, but what we're going to do is we're going to put our fabric right sides together. So with these two pieces, I'm going to take, once again, if I rest my waterproof canvas down here on the bottom, my exterior fabric at the top, they're both right sides up. I just simply flip my Ankara fabric down so it's wrong side up or right sides together. And then I'm just going to clip them in place. Just like this. I'm going to do the same on the other long edge, this other long edge. I'm just going to clip them in place. So all we're going to do is we're just going to sew these long edges. We're not going to sew these short edges. And that's because the short edges will get caught in the seam when we put our lining together. So we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the one long edge, the other long edge, and then we're going to turn it out. But let's do the seams first, and let's go to our sewing machine. Once again, the stitch length for this is going to be a 3. I am using the edge of my presser foot because for me that is a 1/4 inch over here, and I'm just going to stitch down. Okay. So now that I have those stitched together, I'm just going to either reach your hand in there or just flip it open like this. And you're going to flip it around to the front. I don't know, my hand is sometimes too big to get it in there, but you can definitely flip it open the other way. So you just bend this side in and flip it around. And you're going to do that until you get the whole thing out, right side out. So I see a couple of people joining. Are you sewing along or are you just watching? Let me know. If you ever have problems with waterproof canvas, you can either, hit it with some steam like this, or you can use a blow dryer because it makes it soft and then it's easy to turn. But waterproof canvas has absolutely no give, so it's not like cotton or even vinyl has give, right? It's got a direction, but waterproof canvas is just no give at all. But what's nice is if you're following along with me, you can see I have the same struggle you have with getting this turned right side out. Okay, almost there. There we go. Okay, so now once you have this right side out, because these are both right sides, you can actually, if you wanted to, I'm going to roll this in my fingertips. You can also iron this because they're both right side out, and I'll show you that in a minute. But you want to get this as flat as possible. And like I said, the waterproof canvas is stiff and it has no give, so that can be kind of hard. But you can put a little bit of heat on it, as long as you be careful not to catch that underside of that waterproof canvas. So I'm just pushing it and twisting and pushing and twisting. Now, what you can do also, a little tip, is if you want to, so the pocket is going to be sewn like this. It's going to be sewn on the side. We're going to need to top stitch the top part here because this part will not get stitched. We'll be dividing the pocket into 3 pieces. You can divide it in half if you want. You can divide it into 4 pieces. It's up to you. It's your pocket. What I'm going to do with my pocket, so this is something you can do, is I picked a waterproof canvas that sort of complements that blue. So I'm going to roll my waterproof canvas to the front a little bit. And this is not in the directions. So directions say do it even. But since you're watching a video, I can give you another little tip. And you can see that I now have this, what looks like a faux piping or fake piping. And if I do that, then when I do my pocket, I will have this little piece here that shows. If you don't want to do that, you don't do it. What I will mention is on the back, then you have a piece of fabric, but this is the bottom of the pocket, so you're never going to see that. Right? So if you do this, you'll have this fake piping. This is how I'm going to iron mine. The pattern says to do it this way where it's totally flat. So I'm just going to put a little bit of heat on this. But you can see I got most of it pretty flat. And you can just put a little bit of heat on it because it's both of them are right side out, and you can iron on the right side of the waterproof canvas. You just can't iron on the wrong side. And you'll see that it'll get soft, but once it cools down, it'll get hard again. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I have to add some top stitching to this. When you add the top stitching, I'm going to add my top stitching to the fabric itself right here. If you're doing with it totally flat, meaning that you're not putting that little piping here on the bottom, you just have to top stitch that piece right there. And I just want to switch out my bobbin thread. And I'm going to top stitch, like I said, on this piece here. Like I said, if you're just doing it without the fold over, just stitch 1/8 of an inch over here. We're just going to do it on the top. We're not going to do it on the bottom. And that's because the bottom is going to get stitched down when we stitch the actual pocket to the lining. Okay, so I'm just going to very quickly switch out my bobbin thread. And then we'll come to the sewing machine. Okay. All right. 1/8 of an inch top stitch, we always said is a number 4 or 4.5. I'm just going to put this right here and I'm going to stitch across. Okay, so I just top stitched on the fabric piece right here. All right, so then that's done. So we did not top stitch the bottom, like I said, because we're going to come back. And when we attach it to the bag, that's going to get stitched down at the bottom. That's how we do it. So now grab one of your linings. It doesn't matter which one. Just grab one of your linings. And this is going to get laid on here. Remember I said to you, don't have to worry about sealing up this side because what happens is it gets stitched into the seam allowance. So you're going to measure up from the bottom, and the bottom, it gives you the directions how much to measure up from the bottom. And you're going to lay your pocket on there. I clipped the sides in 2 places. You can clip it in 3 places. It doesn't matter. Just make sure it's totally straight. This is also someplace, if you're somebody who uses tags or labels, you can definitely stick a tag or label in this seam over here or up here, even if you wanted to. All right. Now, we're going to measure and divide this into 3 pieces. Once again, if you want to use 2 pieces, you can make it two slip pockets. It's up to you. It's your pocket. Do it any way you'd like. So I'm just going to divide mine. And I draw a line. I use a marker that's erasable or, that goes away. So I'm going to use this one that I've been using, and I'm going to draw a line. And then I'm going to go to this side and I'm going to draw another line. Oops. And once again, you can make it as big or small as you want. I'm doing skinny pockets on either side and a big one in the middle. But once again, take your devices if you know what you're going to put in there and put that in there. Sorry, I think I measured this one a different size. Yeah, I did. Okay. Good. Take off that ink so I don't accidentally sew on it. Okay. I think that's about right. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sew these 2 lines. I left the bigger one in the middle than on either side. Excuse me. For this, the way that we're going to do it is we're going to, I want to make sure I keep me honest. Yep. Okay. We're going to sew along the bottom. So we're going to stitch this down along the bottom using a 1/4 inch seam allowance from end to end. And then we're going to sew the pockets and divide them. All right, so 1/8 inch seam allowance across the bottom. And then we're going to divide the pockets. So let's go to the sewing machine and do that. Excuse me. You can make this either a top stitch, which is what I'm going to do, or you can make it a stitch length of 3, which is what we're using for the seams. It's up to you. I'm just going to use a top stitch right now for this, and I'm just going to go 1/8 inch, once again, inside of my presser foot here. I am going to back tack. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew these pockets. So the way that I sew the pocket is I have my top right here facing towards me. I start at the top. You can sew from the bottom up, but once again, it's alive, so I can show you something different. I start at the top about 1/4 inch down. I put my needle down, and then I stitch right to the top, but I stitch 1 stitch past that top border. So if you have to turn your stitch length down, you can. And then once I've done that, I lift my presser foot, make sure my needle is going up, and I rotate it all the way around so it's pointing back towards the bottom. All right, so now I'm at the bottom of my bag and the top. I then go over those row of stitches, and I sew all the way to the bottom and back tack. That way I know that I've actually back stitched, and I'm just following that line. And then back tack. So for me, it's hard for me to see this row of stitches right here at the top. So the reason I do that is because then I know that I'm going exactly back into those holes again. If you go up and then back tack, sometimes you're a little to the left or the right of it. But by turning it upside down this way, starting about 1/4 inch from the top or 1/2 inch, it's up to you. I put my needle down. I sew up. I actually go over this lip by like 1 stitch, so it just goes over. Turn your needle so it's coming up because you want to make sure that it caught the bobbin thread. Turn it around so it's facing back towards the bottom, just like this. And now you can see the stitches that you need to go over. So all you're simply going to do is go over those stitches. And they go straight down to the bottom. You can do the same thing at the bottom here. It's just that nobody's going to see it. So now I have 3 pockets on my lining. Okay, so I have 1 pocket here, I have 1 here, and I have 1 there. So I have 3 pockets. I'm just going to snip some of these threads that are hanging out here. All right, and I have my 3 pockets. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to construct the lining. I'm on page 14 for those of you who are following along. So I have 1 lining right side up. I'm going to grab my other lining that I constructed. Which is this one. I'm going to lay that right side down so they're right sides together. Look at your seams here and make sure those match. So what I do is I actually take a clip and I stick it right underneath that seam so it's right next to it, so I know that it matches. And then I'm going to do the same with this side. Make sure those seams match. And I'm going to stick a clip right underneath it. Next, we're going to match the bottom corners. So I'm going to match these bottoms. Put a clip in the center. Match the other bottom. Just getting it totally straight. Make sure you have your pocket. So make sure you grab that pocket because we didn't stitch it down. So I'm going to clip the top and the bottom of the pocket so I make sure it doesn't curl in on itself. And then you're going to give a slight tug and match that top seam right here. Just like this. Once again, side, make sure you get that pocket and the pocket. All right. Now, we're going to need to sew this together. So make sure that the top piece here is unfolded. And we're going to sew down both sides and across the bottom using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so we're going to sew down here, across the bottom, and back up using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So we're closing up our lining. All right, so let's go back to the sewing machine and do that. I am using a stitch length of 3. I am going to back tack at the start and the end, or at the beginning and the end. Oh, now we're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure when you get to this seam that you press down on it to make sure they're still aligned when you're done. And if you have to lift your presser foot, like I have to because it's getting caught under there, make sure you have needles in the down position. Okay, there's something she does not like. One second. Something going on here that my sewing machine doesn't like. Okay. And when you get to about a 1/2 inch at the bottom, leave the needle down, lift your presser foot, and pivot. Once again, you can take a 1/2 stitch if you need to. Something was caught in there. And okay. So I've done that. It's all sewn together, right? So you look inside, you see how pretty your pocket is. The next thing we need to do is cut these corners the same way we did for our front or our exterior. So we're going to come back in here and we're going to cut the same box corner that we did before. And we're just going to cut this. And like I said, I draw it and then I cut it. Sometimes I will use the rotary cutter. Just be careful because if it slips, you can cut more than you need over here in the corner. So I'm just drawing the box corners there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out these corners. And your pocket should not be on the bottom. My pocket is right here at this bend. It should not be resting on the bottom. You should not be cutting into your pocket. If you think that you're cutting into your pocket, you may want to take it apart and move your pocket up. Okay? So now that I've cut those out, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to stick our hand in the top over here. We're going to pull it apart. So we're going to separate it. You will be matching these two seams, but what you're going to do is you're going to do what's known as nesting them. You're going to push one seam in one direction. So I'm pushing one seam to my left and I'm pushing the other one to the right. And then you're going to do it, you're going to nest them. So we're going to, when you're done, it should look like that. You can see one is up here and one's down there. And then you're going to clip those. Once again, make sure you pull it so that you get a straight line across the bottom. We are in the home stretch. Okay, and then I'm going to flip it this way, and I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Once again, nest them, push one seam to the right and one to the left. Doesn't matter which. This helps to reduce the bulk. It also helps the seams to match right in the middle. So if you turn your bag right side out, it would look like the seam is going down the side and continuing to the bottom and up the other side. So it gives a nice, neat finish to the inside. Okay, so once you do that, we're going to sew this once again, 1/4 inch seam allowance, the same way we did the exterior of the bag. I am still using a stitch length of 3. And I'm going to back tack at the beginning and the end. Okay, and I am done with the corners. So now my corners are done. That's done. So what do we do now? Well, now what we want to do is make sure that that bottom of our bag doesn't come out and it also doesn't shift in the bag. So to make sure that happens, we're going to grab our exterior piece that's completed. I promise you we're in the home stretch. And we're going to grab this exterior piece that we have. And I'm going to turn it wrong side out. So I'm going to reach in here and turn it so that the foam is on the outside. Just like that. Then what I'm going to do is I have a label on mine. So if you have a label on yours, be conscious of that. I want my pocket to sit to the back of my bag. So I'm going to put my lining, which is also wrong side out, and my pocket is on the bottom. These are the lines for my pocket. I'm going to match up my bottom boxed corners. So this will be the inside of the front because this is my label, and the back will have my pocket. If you want your pocket to be on the front, just flip it around. It's up to you. Honestly, when I flip the bag inside out to make it reversible, nobody can tell whether it's the front or the back for the pocket. So now what I'm going to do is take this corner. Make sure you lay them like this, right? So their bottom's matching. You're going to take this corner and you're going to match this to this. And you're going to do the same thing here. Now, if it's shorter, right? So if you did it in such a way and it's not like this one is shorter than this one, it's okay. Just match that center seam. So match the center and then just fit it however you can out to the ends. But if you were following me, they should match. Every now and then, depending on the way you cut it or stitch it, it could be that one piece is shorter than the other. Okay, totally fine. Just match the center and then match the corners. Just like that. Then I'm going to lay it back down just to make sure I don't turn anything odd. Right? And I'm going to do the same thing with this side. So I'm just going to match these two together. Right? And they should be on the inside. You don't want to match them this way. See, I folded them in. You want to match them on the outside. So I'm just going to pull this around here. And I'm going to match those seams as well. Once again, if one is shorter than the other, don't worry about it. Match the centers first and then match the other, the ends. And if one is short, it'll just stop a little bit before the end. That's okay. Quite okay. So then what we're going to do is we're going to sew both of them together. So this and the other side using a 1/2 inch seam allowance because I want to make sure it stays together. So I'm going to sew across this 1/2 inch and on the other side a 1/2 inch. Take your time here because there is some bulk. All right, so take your time. And back tack at the beginning and the end. Okay, so I have that. You can see that I stitched it. I'm going to do the other side now as well, the other box corner. Open this seam here, this side seam on your phone. Make sure to open that so it's flat. Once again, if you have to lift your presser foot, make sure your needle's in the down position before you lift that presser foot. Okay. Okay, so now we have the bottoms attached. Whew. So if you've hung in there with me, now's the time we finish it off and we do our top. So you're going to flip this over the bottom. So all I simply, the lining. So all I simply do is take my lining and I push it into my bag and flip this over it and around. Okay. Straighten out your bag. So grab your lining and push it down in your bag. I do leave that extra material at the corners for stability. You can trim it down because it is a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You can trim it down to 1/4 inch, but I leave it there for added stability. I don't cut it off. Okay. And then you're going to poke your corners out So push your lining in. They should be attached there. So when you turn your bag right side out, I'm sorry, the other way, it will also be, it'll be stuck at the bottom. And the lining also doesn't shift in your bag. So I'm just poking that out. And then I'm rolling it in my fingers to make sure I get the whole thing out. Just like that. But it gives those corners extra stability. Once again, you can cut it if you would like. All right. So I'm just pushing it down, pushing it down. Okay. Home stretch. So now we have that folded edge. Sorry, that folded edge that goes over the phone. And remember I said to you that you don't want to have the bulk. So we're going to, and I'll take the one without the tape first. You can see this is folded. So if I fold this down like this, because I ironed it, it should stay very nicely. I add clips and then I come back and reclip. So I start at my side where my my connector is, or the part that I'm going to pull in. And I fold that under, just like that. You can add one clip, and I'm in the front. And then I take my lining piece, which has that side seam and that fold as well, over here. I open it up, and then I fold it down to where I ironed. So that's how so you don't have to guess, is it a 1/2 inch? It's where you ironed it and it's folded. I'm then going to align my side seams here with my little connector piece here. And I'm going to clip it in place. I add 2 clips. And that's just so that I can keep it straight. But I add 2 clips. One on either side. So one on the left and one on the right. And because I added this double-sided tape, I'm going to pull my double-sided tape, the backing off my double-sided tape. Just want to make sure I pull the backing off and not the whole piece of double-sided tape. Okay. Once I've done one side, I then go to the other side, and this is on the side before I do the middle. So I try to make sure I match up my sides first. All right, so then I'm on the lining. I'm going to fold it down where I ironed that fold, right, that 1/2 inch fold. Then I'm going to take my little tie here, and I'm going to fold that over the foam that's in there, and I'm going to match the seams. Just like that. So take your time with this. It will be a little bit fiddly, or it can be a little bit fiddly. Okay. And then you can come back to the front and the back. So I'm going to just pull this, give it a slight tug, and I'm going to fold this over my foam. So this is the piece that had the double-sided tape, so it's going to stick to that foam really nice. But it doesn't matter if you didn't use double-sided tape. Okay, so that's my front. I'm going to fold this piece here as well. I'm just standing it up so you can see. And I want to make sure that I align, and we can come back and play with it. But the center seams here, we want to make sure they align. And we can come back and readjust and adjust and readjust. So I did the center, and now I'm going to start clipping it all along the way. When I get to that strap here, I use 2 clips like I did on this tie, because I want to make sure that that strap stays straight up and down. Do not clip your strap down like this. Clip it up. Do the same with your tie. It should be clipped in an upward position. And you're going to use a lot of clips here. Excuse me. You're going to use a lot of clips. So, you know, it's okay. So that's my front on one side, and then I'm going to do the same. Make sure you tuck this strap in. It should go in about a 1/2 inch. So even though you basted it to the edge, when you fold it in, your strap should go in about a half an inch. It shouldn't be at the very end. It should be about a half an inch. And make sure that that front is over the foam, because when you top stitch, it should catch your foam. And if you have to tug a little and pull a little to get it totally straight, that's totally fine. And for your strap, make sure you put 2 clips, one on either side to hold it in place. Make sure it's totally straight because you don't want it to shift and be crooked when you're done. Okay, so that's my front. I'm just double checking and triple checking, making sure I get everything clipped together. So once you've done that, you can then flip it over to the back and do the same thing. The front piece, like I said, should be clipped over the foam. So that's normally where I start clipping, and then I readjust my clips accordingly. Remember to clip your straps in an upward position, so they shouldn't be down. And hopefully you'll see how ironing that fold really helps. Really, really helps at this point. Everybody's kind of quiet out there. This is what's referred to as a drop-in lining. So there is no birthing through the bottom of the pocket or anything. We're just dropping it into the bag and we're putting it together. There are no seams, so there was no seams on the inside of the bag where we pulled it through, and it's a totally smooth finish. So that's one thing nice about a drop-in lining, that there are no extra seams that you have to sew, and you can see. Okay, excuse me. So now you can see I have everything clipped together. Double check your sides, push your lining down. Like I could see a little bit of buckling, but that's okay. I'm just going to push that lining down because I want to make sure when I stitch this around, there's no buckling happening, right? So just want to make sure it's smooth. You can see that. If you have to, I normally pull the sides of my bag like this. Push that down a little bit more. Check on the inside to make sure that everything is aligning here. So pull it up, make sure that all the pieces are aligning so nothing's further down than the other. Because when you top stitch this, if one is further down, what's going to end up happening is you will miss it or you won't catch it. Okay. So now we're on the final step, and we're going to top stitch this all the way around the top of the bag. I am going to use an 1/8 of an inch top stitch. If you're not comfortable with using an 1/8 of an inch, you can use 1/4 of an inch and then come back later on, or you can use a 3/8 of an inch. It's up to you what you're comfortable with. The trick is to catch the front and the back. I have a single stitch machine, so I do not have I do not have the piece that slides out, the free arm. So it'll get a little fiddly around it'll get a little bit fiddly around the sewing machine over there. So to help me, so I'm not going crazy, is I'm going to turn my bag completely inside out. And hope I don't dislodge clips here because I don't have the free arm. And then what I do is I stitch from the inside of my bag. But if you have the free arm, of course, you don't have to do this. I also find that by doing this, because I do not have the free arm, what happens is I get a neater top stitch on the outside. So I turn mine, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch from the inside because I don't have a free arm. So it's hard for me to, it's a lot easier for me to stitch this way. I start my bags where possible. I start my bags from a side seam and I stick my needle right in the side seam and then I stitch all the way around, only because this hides any back stitching that you may do, because people don't look at the seams, but if you do it on the front or the back, you'll see it. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to take my time and I'm going to sew all the way. I'm going to sew all the way around this at 1/8 of an inch. All right. So let's go to the sewing machine. Oops. Okay. Did I mention the camera's right there? Make sure when you sew your straps, once again, that the straps are up. Also, for anybody who needs to take a break here, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed, make sure you have enough bobbin thread, right? You don't want to do this and you run out of bobbin thread. Okay? So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that I don't run out of bobbin thread here. I'm increasing to a 4.5, only because it's kind of thick and the top stitch, but you can do it between a 4 and a 4.5. I am going to start with this seam. Once again, I'm pulling my tie up to make sure it's totally flat. I'm going to stick this under here. And take your time, make sure you readjust as you need to. I'm going to start with my needle in the down position only because it makes it easier. I will back tack. Once again, adjust as you need to. I'm readjusting constantly. You'll see me do that throughout this process. When you get to your strap, this is my first strap. I'm going to pull it up, make sure it's totally perpendicular to my bag. Once again, adjust your strap perpendicular. Okay. So I don't know, was anybody else holding their breath? I was most definitely holding my breath throughout this. Playing chicken bobbin. So we're done. I'm going to turn it right side out. And I'm going to cut some of these ends. If you have a straight stitch machine like I do, and you've ever tried top stitching and frustrated, it's doable. Just turn your bag right side out. I'm now going to turn this right side out so that you can see it. Push those corners out. Push your lining into your bag. Give it a good ironing. Good ironing. And I normally pop my thing. And then the way that it works is you push the corner, the side ties in. All right, so you just push them in. You tie them like this. And over time, it'll stay. Eventually, it'll stay over time. Hope I didn't twist my straps after giving the lecture on strap twisting. But that's what it looks like. Okay, I just flattened this a little bit. But that's your bag, all done. And then if you want to, you can untie it. If you need more room because you're carrying something, you can untie it. And then it's just a regular tote. If you want, you can also, if you don't like it that way, you could always turn it this way. Like I said, mine, I like the blue color, so I turn it this way. Poke it out. In the corners. And because it is a drop-in lining, there is no seams. It's reversible, right? So then you can carry it this way, right, with the pocket on the outside. And if you wanted to, you could put one on the other side as well. You could put a zipper pocket if you're comfortable doing that. But now it's reversible. And then you can pull the ties in on this side also. So there's no seams. Everything is done. So I want to thank you guys for joining me today. I hope that you had a lot of fun. This is the Alkebulan Reversible Tote. It is a beginner-friendly pattern. It is a lot of steps, but you can see that it's really nice. And you can use some fun fabric with it, which is also very good. Statement pieces. I used waterproof canvas, like I mentioned before, because this bag was done with the waterproof canvas when we did it in the workshop. However, the pattern is written for 100% cotton. So if you're comfortable sewing with cotton, you can try it with cotton. It gives the same amount of stability, and that's because of the foam, the anti-soft and stable foam. And the waterproof canvas just gives it a little bit more. Waterproof canvas, once again, is not forgiving, so there's no stretch. So if you're not used to working with something that has no give, you may find it challenging. This uses no hardware, which is also very nice. So you don't have to run out and get hardware and need any of those extra bits and bobs. But I'd like to thank you guys so much for joining me. I will put the link to the pattern in the show notes below. I will also put a link to my website where I do sell Ankara fabric and hardware. And my name is Catherine from Sew Your Bag. Have a wonderful evening. Once again, thank you for joining me, and everybody stay safe.